is Norwich Confidential with your hosts, Dr. Ben Hong, Bonnie Hong, and Mr. Bob Farwell. Mr. Bob Farwell, hi, I'm Bonnie Hong.
I'm Ben Hong.
And Bob has excused himself tonight. He's making a lot of apologies to our guests this evening.
He'll soon be our guest.
Bob will soon be our guest, yes.
But we have a very good guest tonight.
We
I
do.
guess.
And we're going to be discussing education and the impact the federal policies have on our education system, the impact our state budget has on our own economy and particularly our education system, and maybe come up with some solutions that both you as a viewer and a parent and I can do to begin moving our education in Norwich forward. Our guest this evening, we're very excited. One of my most favorite people is Abby Dolliver, the superintendent of Norwich Public Schools.
Hi, Bonnie.
Welcome.
Welcome,
Doctor.
Abby.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're very excited about having you tonight. I think that most people are forgetting what a crisis education in this country is in. I guess our first question really would be, where do you see Norwich in both the state education system and nationally?
Okay. It's easy for me to address in the state.
Okay.
And then part of my own feelings about where I think we are, which may be different than where the state or some of the assessment data says we are. So I'll start with that.
Okay.
And then if I go on too long, just tell me and you can...
I'll interrupt with
Okay,
questions.
good.
We will ask you tough questions.
Oh boy, okay. I have to feel like one of my students now.
That's right.
In terms of Norwich, you know, we are considered an urban district. So Norwich, as I knew it growing up, is different than now than it was then, which is not a bad thing. I celebrate our diversity, our being an urban center. People don't always see it that way, but we are considered urban like New Haven or Hartford, only smaller. So we have a lot of the challenges that urban centers have, different than suburban or rural districts, although all of education has challenges, as you mentioned. So in the state, we're identified as an alliance district, one of the poorer performing districts in the state. And with that comes some additional, I would say, oversight or support. We're not taken over by the state or anything like that, but we have opportunity for additional funding or programs that we implement if we apply and get chosen to do so to help us improve our students' achievement. And that's our goal.
What does the impact of some of the, we do have a lot of second language.
Yes, we have, any one given time, we have probably approximately 30 languages spoken in our schools. And with the guidelines, it says that if you have 20 or more of a language in one school, then you have to have a center there, a bilingual center. So we have several in the district, probably due to have more as people move into areas and live together and then send their students to the same school. So if we have 20 or more in a school, we have a center. We have Haitian centers and Spanish centers right now.
So how does these different ethnic groups make up in your school systems?
Our goal is
population-wise, yes.
Our goal is to teach all students to speak English
Yes.
and to read English, but we also respect the fact that at home they may not, that their families could have come here yesterday and the students show up in our schools and here they are in a country where everybody's speaking other than what they understand. So our goal is to get them to be able to speak and understand English and read and do math and all the other subjects.
Yeah, most of the time at that young age, they do pick up languages very, very easily.
They do.
And you know, it's actually the parents and the grown-up that makes it a little bit difficult. So for that reason, I would say that it's probably more of a cultural learning that will make them integrate into the system. Probably language is one of them, but there are always a lot of other factors that you will have to consider.
Right, and when you mention cultural differences, we celebrate that. We are working this year with Dr. Tamika LaSalle, who's a professor at University of Connecticut, and the program is called Cultural Competency, and it's for us, the staff, and she's going school to school and parents to help us be sensitive and accepting and welcoming to everybody. That's just one of the things we're doing. And in terms of the multiple languages, for example, when I send out a school messenger, which is no school tomorrow, I'm not saying there's no school tomorrow yet, but if there were a message such as that, it goes out in 5 languages. We prepare it.
What 5 languages?
We have English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cantonese, and Mandarin. So people...
So that's represent the makeup of
that's
the
the largest
ethnic group that we
the
have.
largest 5.
Is that right?
And we have so many other languages we couldn't possibly translate into all that. And almost everything we send out, we try to translate, but due to staffing and people who are skilled in that, it's difficult. So we always have a little message that in those languages specifically, if you need this translated, call this number.
So you have identified the factors that might be
barriers.
A barrier for the learning.
We're always looking, but that's one of them.
Because that would have been easier if everybody is uniform. You don't have to think about languages, you don't have to think about cultural acceptance or diversity for that reason. But you add on to that, and now you're beginning to wonder, well, are we able to get into this level where we are just going to teach?
Right.
You know, say, when can I send them home with schoolwork or homework? Because right now they're just trying, exactly, they're just trying to integrate to us.
You're right.
Well, let me get back to just some basic figures, okay? Because in nationally, the United States nationally is ranked with the 40 most developed countries in the world. We're ranked number 20. That's only on some criteria.
Right.
We're actually ranked number 30 in some others.
Right.
And this is really, I think, is shocking for most Americans that want to say, you know, America has the best educational system. They would be very shocked to realize that we really do not. We are outranked by, I mean, when you look at the countries whose education systems top the U.S., you're talking about countries like South Korea, Slovakia, China, Russia, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, Finland. Finland has been ranked number 1, except this last go-around. They did drop down. But
I just heard, I can't think of his name now, but he republished his book about the secrets of Finland, and I heard him speak, and I have the book, and the board, it was at a board conference, a Board of Ed conference, and it's quite interesting on it was very simple, some of the reasons why they're successful.
Why?
Well, wait a minute, Bonnie.
Let's talk about Finland.
Because I want to discuss Bonnie about her figures. Oh, go ahead, Ivy.
Okay.
We'll talk about some of your...
But this is...
Yeah, I think it seems so simple. Their days are much shorter than ours. We're thinking we have to add on to the days, and we do. We have school from, longer days. Some of the funding we get, we add an hour extra at a couple of our schools, because some research tells you that. So you know how research is, right? Especially as a medical person, right? It tells you one thing, it tells you something else. You have to sift through. They have family engagement, but they get down to the basics in Finland. It just seemed very simple. He said, just because we do things a certain way doesn't mean it would work in the United States, but it's just interesting to see how their cultures are different.
Well, that is the truth. It's the culture, because in different parts of the world, they put education and being able to achieve higher levels of education as their main goal in life. And in here, it is really not. So, but let me talk to Bonnie about a few items that she put out there, like some other countries are way ahead of the United States in terms of mathematics, maybe, or languages and so on.
Mathematics and science, particularly.
But let me put something into your, add into your numbers, Bonnie. There is no better place to go on postgraduate study than in the United States. First of all, in the United States, you will see that the best postgraduate courses are here. The other parts of the world do not even come second. And why is that? Well, the reason for that obviously is that you have already screened the students that really are going to be serious in school and not just even achieving grades, but able to use what they want to achieve in life. Now,
that's absolutely true.
Let me continue on with that, because you're putting in a lot of numbers here, and I grew up in that culture as well. You may say that, well, gee, Malaysians or Singaporeans probably will top, the 100% score in math, and that is true. And let me give you an example for this also. They probably top music, so you let those 8-year-old, 10-year-old play an instrument. I mean, they can really pound a keyboard. But the one thing we realize is this, that the difference is that when a kid here pound a keyboard, there's so much feeling into that put in, whereas in other parts of the world, they just pound a keyboard. There is no feeling. What does that tell me? Very simple. When we teach, we really teach them. And there are a lot of kids that will not be able to handle it. But if you go to other places like Korea or South Korea or even China, those kids can memorize the entire alphabet in just 3-4 weeks and so on. So will they do well on test scores? They very well do well on test scores. Do they understand what they are learning? No.
That's not really true, though, Ben. When you talk about higher education, let me please. I want to really ask.
Okay,
I really want to get to Abby because, but I will disagree with you about. We do have the best secondary, higher education system in the world. Unfortunately, it's not our kids that are graduating from those schools. So, that is a big, valid point. In Connecticut, we'll move on to Connecticut. We're ranked, Connecticut, of all 52 states, is ranked number 37. We're pretty low down on the list. Not as low as a lot of the other states, but 37 is a pretty low number. Looking at the difference between, like Ben pointed out, that the Asian countries very often have very, very high scores, even when they come into this country. And part of it is culture. There is one thing that it is an Asian culture, and it brings Confucius to mind, who really equated the difference between learning and thought. And what Confucius really, they believe, is that learning is to improve the way you think. Learning without thought is trivia. It's information that's trivia. Thought without learning is having uninformed opinions. So you have to have an informed opinion is created when you combine learning and thought. I think that it seems to me, and that's what I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
I want to see how much of that is being corrected in our school system.
For us,
in Norwich.
In Norwich, I'm happy to say, based on some of these additional resources that we've applied for and gotten, we've been able to change our curriculum and focus on learning in terms of the why, what deeper understanding of what they're learning, not just what you said, Doctor, knowing numbers or memorizing. It's the figuring out of how come this is so and how did we get there. So for English, for language arts, I'll call it reading, writing. Right. It's called Readers Writers Workshop from Columbia University, which is, we know, it's a world-renowned university in New York, and many of our staff went and got trained, and we were selected by them because of our interest to have some of their specialists come and work with us, and that's really kind of something to brag about. So we're implementing that model, I'll call it, different than a curriculum kind of, where we're really, the kids are reading and writing often. We have reading blocks of time, And then it's about what are you doing? You know, in my day, or the old days, or not that, you know, my day was long ago, but you would read a chapter, they'd say, read chapter 10, answer the questions, and then write down the definitions of these words.
Right.
It's not like that anymore. There's no real textbook. We bought thousands of books, trade books I call them, books that you might pick up for your grandchildren in the store, of any book of interest at different levels. So they're all leveled. We call them leveled readers at certain interest levels. Some are in science, so that we bring science in. Some are social studies, and some are just nonfiction. And students know their level based on assessments that we do when they have their bin, and they can read today what they feel like reading today, and then we dig deeper about the story, the characters, write about it. So it's not just reading chapter 11 in this book because that's the book we're using.
And that's really what I want to say. And that is the big difference in the education that we have here as compared to what it is outside the United States. And because I have learned about this, Bunny, I grew up in an environment where I go to school in the morning from 7 o'clock until noontime, and that is all for Chinese languages and subjects and everything. And then we have a 1 hour lunch break, and from 1 o'clock to 5 p.m. we go into English or Philippine languages and histories. So those are the kind of cultures. But I grew up in an environment also where parents are very proud of the achievement of the kids, so there's that competition. Now, in here, or whereas in other parts of the outside of the United States, they are very proud that they have read this book, and they are very proud that they can answer a question based on what they have read. But I watch our 6-year-old grandson growing up, and at this time, not only can he read, but he can actually create, and he is able to analyze. That is not taught outside of the United States. Outside of the United States, there's a lot, and especially in the Asian countries. I mean, you could tell them that they can read the entire War and Peace book, and they can probably make a report. But if you ask them, why was it like that, or how come it achieved in such a level, they can't make it, because they cannot have this creative mind training while they were in school.
And the comprehension.
And exactly.
And we're doing similarly in math. Last year we started the reading, writing. This year we started it's called Math and Focus, Singapore Math actually it's called. Similar, it's teaching students how to think.
Yes.
And to have a love of learning, so you're not necessarily sitting in rows and the teacher's up there like this. You're in little pods, you're sitting with a friend, we do pair and share, independent groups. We've also been able to, with some of our funding, hire part-time people, people with degrees, many of whom are retired teachers, just so happens it works out, who come in and do small group instruction for us, so that while the teacher's doing one guided reading group, they can be working with this group while they read their books to discuss what they're reading and build their skills.
And that's true.
In their field of expertise?
Not necessarily. The people who are coming in to help us,
yes.
Some are not teachers. They're just, the qualification is to have a degree, college degree, and we will teach them, depending on what their skill is, how to do this particular group. They're not necessarily teaching, they may be encouraging reading.
Right.
We have online programs too that support this. They may be supervising that, so it depends on the match. I talk a lot about match of people with our need. That has a big that makes a big difference. So some of it's that.
So, and this goes back to answer your question, Bunny. Why is it that we cannot score that much? Because we are not just parroting the multiplication table. We're not just parroting the languages.
Then I think that you want to make an excuse, and like a lot of. Please let me finish my sentence.
You are bringing in all the answers in terms of numbers.
No,
and that is not good measure.
Would you please listen to me for 1 minute?
I'm listening to you, because that is wrong information that you're getting from.
I think that what Ben is saying is what a lot of Americans believe. They really believe that there's a reason why America is not testing well, why we are on international scales, why there is, why we rank number 20. Most Americans want to believe that those are some of the reasons, when in fact, I think that you and I both recognize that there really is a problem that has to be faced. It's not just a matter of how students test.
Well, you can solve that problem by teaching them how to take exams, but I wouldn't want to go that way.
That isn't what Abby and I are saying.
The numbers here, wanted to say, okay, the United States ranked 39th in healthcare, overall healthcare, way behind Cuba. Would you go to Cuba and have a heart transplant or a coronary artery bypass? Obviously no. Now, why is it that it is ranked like that?
Some of it's the ranking and the tests you look at, in my opinion, all right? Because we were labeled, Norwich was labeled as a failing district. That's the word people use, which I can't even hardly say it. Several years ago, based on one test measure. We do so many other fabulous things that kids are now, especially with some of the new things that we're able to try, kids are gaining so much knowledge. So is it absolutely measured on a test? Depends. We have to do that. We have to be accountable. That's the push. And I'll tell you an interesting thing about accountability and testing. But to me, to call us a failing district based on that, and they haven't changed that measure because that test went away, and they haven't found something, well, they're working on something that will take its place, so they don't take that label away, nor do they come in and see what happens in our schools and see what kids are taking away from what happens, and that's very hard. That's why I always say, come in, you won't know what we do until you see it.
One example is your science fair.
Right, exactly. That Rotary supports us at when we send kids to the science fair. That's thinking now. Now we're fortunate enough to have 2 magnet schools that are federally funded. These are our staff who say, we want to do other things for our kids. We want to offer, many of our kids, over 70% qualify for free and reduced lunch. So they're all smart, they're all have parents who care very much about them, but they don't have the opportunity for exposure that maybe what our kids might have had, or many kids have throughout the state. So, so it's a lot of it's about exposure. If you don't have books in your home because you can't afford to, that's part of our reading program too. We send a lot of books home. Then you're going to be behind to start. And then you go home and you don't have that stimulation. It's hard. It's no one's fault. It's the way the economy is.
And those are the factors, again, that
those are contributing factors, right?
May impede learning.
Correct.
And that's why, in my opinion, that not all kids are the same. So when you say that they come in to do the measurement, are those educators, or are they just mathematicians, or are they just statistics?
The tests are made by whoever makes them, and I don't know that they're educators, to be honest. Some people at the state level who make the determination of what tests are not educators.
That's
and
correct.
They'll forgive me for that, but that's okay. That's the
that
truth,
is the real,
correct? And so we assess in multiple ways, always. And to see if kids are making progress, I get that. But you have to sit for this standardized test that judges the kids and us and your city and your state and your country, to me, doesn't make sense. If we look at progress along the way, which we call benchmark assessments, and we do them all the time in different areas with different assessments, that tells us the story better. So we've been assessing, the state says you must do this, you must do. Well, now the state put out a grant recently, and we could get $10,000 to study assessments. Are they working or not? And do you need to are you over assessing? I'm not making this up. And this is after we're mandated to do these assessments, and now we're told, well, maybe, so that's, to me, it's encouraging if we get the result that we want from that. So we applied for that grant, and we got it. So now we're studying
how to study.
If these assessments, how much is too much and what's right. So I'm hoping we get a good answer, a good outcome out of it.
But the whole thing really is that it is subjective, and the subjectiveness of this whole thing is that there are kids that are really bright, and when you put them in the same level of say, education that they are in, they get bored.
Right.
There's no challenge.
That's
And,
why we have the reading program we do,
right.
because we level the books. So if you're reading way up here, you can have a book in your interest area that's at your level. So my nephew, who's 8, you know, he took one of these really fat novels and he I read it in 2 days. I said, okay, let's talk about what did you read. You know, I said that to his parents. I said, that's great that he can read quickly, but is he understanding what he's reading?
right.
It's that kind of thing. Do we know that kid?
So if you make
One of the outcomes of a lot of the research that's been done show that the real factors that are really important in education are obviously the quality of teaching.
Right.
The quality of the teacher. And it's not just the students that are learning. A lot of these studies also are showing that adults have to continue to learn to keep their skills. I was very impressed with your talking about the classes that some of the teachers have already gone to. How often are the teachers learning, relearning?
Always. We have developed a couple of programs, several programs actually, to support teachers, and we're only able to do this because we qualify as a lower, it's just like crazy, but you qualify as a lower performing poor district, then you can apply for these things to help you support this, which is good. So that's how come we can do it. So we have a program called Teacher Leaders. People applied, they were interviewed by administrators, they had to be recommended, and so there's 2 in every school who provide, we have professional learning communities, we call them PLCs. We find books or articles or just reviewing the curriculum weekly. Teachers are doing this. We have data teams weekly, different ones, grade level, school-wide. We're creating leaders out of our teachers so that they understand what they're teaching and why, and learning more as they go. Again, I mentioned that Columbia University sends people. We have other specialists. We also have contracted with Dr. Kaufman, who is from UConn also, who is specialist in reading, and he comes in and he goes right in the classroom and teaches, and teachers come in and watch. So we have like what we call micro labs also. So we have teacher leaders who are modeling, and we have teachers that come in from other classrooms or grade levels or to watch and then learn from those who know. We have what we call instructional specialists who are coach-like people. So if I'm having trouble teaching this particular unit, it doesn't click for me, they'll model, and then I'll do it with them, and we do it together, and that's how we learn.
Because that was one of the comments that I read in almost every article that's talking about how we can improve our education system, because they even equated it to physicians. I mean, what kind of physicians would we have if they never had ongoing education?
I know. Right.
I mean, it would be very frightening,
Right.
but this is a new thing for teaching.
these are
relatively
the
new.
basic things for any careers or profession.
You need to,
You have to
But if
be
you're not-
able to
continue to learn.
to learn.
Lifelong
and
learning.
Different methods
Lifelong
and so
learning.
on.
And that's really what we want to impart to our children.
Right, and so the other part of it is with once a month, the board has agreed, our Board of Ed, trying to be so proactive. The students go home early once a month, 1 o'clock, it's not that early, 2 hours specific for professional development. Because 3 days a year, or 4 or 5, on one topic is not enough.
Right.
So we're really planful on what they do, either by grade level or school. Once a month we have that opportunity. And parents support it because they're not complaining. It's that they know that we have to keep learning. Now, the state developed a new teacher evaluation plan a couple of years ago. We piloted it last year. We're in it, and an administrator evaluation. And it's based on good instruction. What's good instruction? So I have professional development for our administrators that I have experts come in, and we teach each other. We go school to school in groups, the administrators do. They go into classrooms. We have to look for certain key indicators on whether good instruction is happening, are the kids engaged, is the classroom welcoming. There's just basic things for good teaching.
Right.
And that's the feedback we give teachers. It's a very reflective model, which I like. I think it helps. If I just say, here's your score, like we do to kids, here's your score, but we don't have a conversation about it. How do you ever get better? So it's reflective. just like we're teaching the kids to be. So we're coming around to that. I think the evaluation model was a little over the top in terms of what it required and the time it takes, pages of writing and
documenting.
Accountability, and I get it. I want to be accountable, and we are in every place, every way we look. But anyway, that's just another story.
Well, yes.
What happens with those teachers that you find are not progressing?
Well, through the teacher eval plan,
Or you just recognize that in that classroom, there's no connection with the students.
Right.
The students aren't grasping it.
And that happens, and so there's a process that you would go through. Not if someone's tenured, we still have tenure. If someone's tenured and it's that egregious, there's still a process, and we go through that process based on their contract and their teacher eval plan. Not like in business where you would walk in and I'd say, like Donald Trump, I guess, you're fired. We don't do that.
A different position,
Right.
somewhere where they're not impacting a whole year of a student's learning.
Well, and those statistics about, if you have a teacher who's not really up to speed, how much a student, I don't know it, I just know it's enormous. If a student loses time based on having, we have, people who are on leave sometimes, in and out, we try to find the best substitutes. It's not the same as having a really good teacher. So we do the best we can that's why we're in and out of the classrooms with experts, with ourselves, to give feedback. It's not a got you. It's how do we do this together so that we know that the students are learning.
For the simple reason that the teacher is really a very strong model for a growing kid.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter what you do, I mean, even when adult, your teacher is really a model, or not. You don't want to be if you don't like that. So you told us about a lot of positive things that you're doing. What are the roadblocks?
The roadblocks.
Or what are the largest challenges?
No, I don't want to get the details of this, money. That's what we're here for. Because
You want the details? Is that what you said?
I wanted the details of all the roadblocks that you could probably, from
For
top to
us,
bottom.
for
Yes.
Norwich, I'm going to
Yes,
speak
for
just to
Norwich.
us,
Just for
all right?
Norwich.
And none of these are excuses. I'm not an excuse
No,
maker.
yeah.
I call things contributing factors,
Yeah.
okay? So you pile them all up, and they're all contributing to who you are.
But
So,
I think it's very important that the public really begins to really understand.
Right.
And if they don't know what the problems are,
Right.
we're never going to be able to work as a community
Correct.
to try to solve them.
and we need community support. I would say that's one of our biggest roadblocks,
Okay.
is that the community doesn't really own education. It's something we do to those
Them.
kids. And our community's different now, and I think that's hard for people. It's changed. We're poorer, we're more urban, like I said before. We're multicultural, all wonderful things. If you come to one of our concerts tomorrow night, there's a concert, and if you had not seen our students before, it's like, I still get emotional when I watch our kids. It's a choral concert. So
And
some
where
of
is
it's
it?
at Kelly Middle School
At Kelly?
in the Jacqueline Owens Auditorium at 6:30. Unless there's bad weather, then it's Friday evening,
But it's tomorrow night
tomorrow night, yes.
at Kelly.
It's our choral concert, so it's great. Certain grade levels from all the schools come together and sing, and it's
wow.
just beautiful. So that's one of them. So society, I'm not going to get into a big discussion about that. Parents are struggling. Many of our parents, they're working or not working weird shifts. Some places you can't take time off, so they're stressed financially, emotionally, so the kids don't have kind of continuity at home. They're kind of home, either on text or watching TV, so it's stimulation for some of our students. Another
If you have 70% that have free lunches or subsidized lunch, I would assume that many of them don't have computers at home either.
Yes and no. They maybe don't have computers, but they all have pretty much cell phones, many of them. That's another thing that we've been able to do through our different funding sources. Not general fund. This is not, people would say, oh, it's all taxpayer money. I get that. And we know there's big discussions about Norwich taxes. These are coming from state grants that we've applied for. Another challenge, and I'll get to finances last, because that's always the big one, is that 40% of our staff now are grant funded. Now, if anyone understands about grants, because in a district like ours with so many needs, you need people. You need people to work in small groups with students. More, I'm never one to say more is always better, but more people who are trained that can sit with our students who need it and teach them to love learning and how to read and how to do math is what we need. So with those interventionists I mentioned that do the small groups, people like that come in and they provide such a service, not just that, but in other ways. That's why 40% of our staff are grant funded. Now we have fabulous extended learning opportunities, which are after school clubs, exposure.
They do write their own grant application.
We do.
You do?
Yes.
Obviously.
We do.
And then once you get the approval for that grant, then that's when you pick up the candidate to
Correct.
fill, to use that grant.
One of the goals, no, I'm jumping around a little. One of the goals with some of the accountability that we have, there's a model called Essential Schools, and it's about having quality schools, and that's how we're accountable. That's how we're measured. So when we talk about the grants that we get, and I didn't even mention some of them, we have to be accountable to the state or federal government.
Of course.
And one of the areas you talked about having good teachers is called talent. It's called TACO, the model. I don't know. But talent, academics, culture and climate, so these are all of our challenges, and operations. They all mean different things, but you can get what they are. It's a challenge in terms of every little area has challenges under it, but talent is so that we recruit and retain high quality teachers. So part of that challenge. Now I want to bring up one other thing about Norwich is since the start of school, so August, right? Now remember, preschools, they all come in, the 3-year-olds, but 750 new students in Norwich.
This year.
Yes, so far, through January 31st.
750.
750 new. Hold on. 158 are new to a school because they moved within the district.
Okay.
So 908 new students since, let's say, August 31st to January 31st. 908 new students. 403 students left.
Wow.
And we're still at around the same enrollment. So that tells you that a good portion of our students come and go, and they move from school to school. That's part of a challenge. Now, with our new reading and math program, we're hoping that there's more continuity across the district, so that if I went from one school to another, I won't have to start over. This will help, but that kind of what I call transiency is remarkable. Most districts or suburban or rural would not see this kind of, no. Most schools would not have the same students in their school in kindergarten that you have in 5th grade. No way.
I went through grammar school with the exact same students from kindergarten through 5th, and then at Buckingham through 6th through 8th.
Right, that's right.
So the first roadblock that you're telling us is related really to the family unit.
Some of
you talked about the cultural differences. Some of them may not have enough time with their parents because their parents are both working a late shift, and so they come home, they really cannot have that habit of pursuing their homework or so on. And then you also mentioned about the non-continuity because most of these families probably are moving around. So it's a family unit that I think is
some of it is that, and we see that.
The non-support that you're getting from the family.
So part of our, again, accountability, as I said, is culture climate. That includes family engagement.
Right.
So we have, through one of our grants, again, we hired what we call family liaisons. Now, it's not that we didn't encourage parents to come to PTO, or we have school governance councils, or whatever events. When there are events with your kid in them, everybody comes, which is great. So these family liaisons are helping us with attendance. They're helping us go out and talk to parents and say, come on in, because we don't have the capacity to do all that ourselves. But they work for us through one of the 40% of our employees. But we identified that as a need. How do we engage parents? No matter what you do, or who you are, you have a gift, because we have your student, so you bring a gift to us, and you give a gift to us. So now you don't have to feel like I have to bake for a bake sale. It could be that you just come to an event, whatever works for you, to help people to feel comfortable culturally and in whatever way to come into our school. So I think that's a big improvement that we've seen.
Well, have you heard the statement that says, be careful with what you wish for?
Yes.
It just might come true.
That's good.
Well, you've noticed that in some community, it's the parents that are actually demanding and actually controlling what to teach and who the teachers are and so on.
I know.
So that is kind of a balance, basically.
It's a balance.
It's a balance. But what does Norwich offer in terms of art and music?
Well, this is one of our a huge challenge. We have art, music, physical education, and library at every level, from K, well, really pre-K to 8th grade, in a rotation. So the students in the elementary schools have that every week. They have, 40 minutes, or preschoolers get less.
Once a week?
Yes. Yes. In the middle school, they go through rotation, so they may have it for 30 days and then they're done. Several years ago, around 4 years ago, we had to cut the budget, which happens a lot. And so we had to look at anything that wasn't mandated. And that could be a whole 2 shows talking about what's mandated that we don't get funded, that we must provide and do. Such as the bilingual centers. They're a good thing, but we don't get additional funding for that. So that's just an example. So we had to eliminate things from our budget. So that in the middle school, not mandated is instrumental music, and not mandated is world language. However, when you go to high school, I'm told that if you don't have world language in middle school, you don't qualify to take an AP course. I met with a group of parents the other night, and they said to me, Abby, isn't that discriminatory? I go, well, yes, speak about it. Because their students have the ability, the capability, the will. We don't have the capacity because we don't have the financial support to provide that. What we did, and it's not like having a teacher who can teach Spanish or French or another language, through one of our grants, because you can't supplant what the city budget's supposed to provide with most grants. Supplant means, oh, we'll put everything over here so that the city doesn't have to take responsibility. You're not allowed to do that with grants. We have to be very creative in how we develop positions. We purchased an online world language program, and it has millions of languages, but we're having kids focus. But it's not the same as having a teacher, but at least they're getting exposure. Parents want, and we want. I mean, the Board of Ed every year is heartbroken when we put it in the budget, and when it comes down to it, we have to take it out for our kids. All the surrounding towns, pretty much, throughout elementary school, their students have the opportunity to have world language. Almost every town around us. We don't have it even in the middle school. Instrumental music. Now, you think about NFA's band in the day, it's still very good, but it's smaller. We don't have instrumental music. One gift we have is Quantic School became a magnet school with a focus on arts and music. So they have special funding federally to infuse that into their theme, as a theme. And so they have a very small group of students now who are learning instruments. So they have concerts. So then I think, and it's very hard for me to think about, when they get through 5th grade and they have to go to our middle school, there's no more music. So, and there's a group of parents that are very, very supportive of our music program, but when push comes to shove, when you have to provide certain things and you only have this much money, that's what goes.
Now, let me ask you this question. Obviously, a lot of that depends on times and financials and so on, but are there enough volunteer people there to say, hey, listen, this is what's been cut in our curriculum, so let's just make this happen through our own efforts?
As a volunteer to do it?
As a volunteer, yeah.
We have some volunteers, but it's not like having, I have to have a planned class.
Yes.
So if a student's going to have a rotation through world language like we used to have at our middle schools, French, you remember, right?
Yes.
French and Spanish, and you would rotate through. you can't count on a volunteer for that. You need to have a certified teacher. Those are the regulations.
Right.
So the mandates are, and rightly so, you have to have, qualifications. So we could have a volunteer maybe support the online program, but we have an interventionist or someone who we've hired to do that, but not a certified world language teacher.
Right.
That's a different
No,
cost.
because all of your, what you just mentioned, all the topics or subjects that you have are all credit
Well,
rated, isn't?
it's not really credit through 8th grade. You know, once you get to high school, it's credit. You need
Right.
so many credits. To
Yeah.
graduate at the lower level, it's not based on credit.
And
It's
not
based on what's mandated for you to
What-
teach.
right, what we
coming
have-
from
Correct.
the
How many,
Department of
we
Education.
have to do certain number of hours
Number
of
of hours.
instruction in certain
That's
areas.
what I meant.
Yes, you're
That's what I
absolutely
mean,
right. Yes, so it could be like credit hours, but we
Right.
don't give credits. So, and then they're updating the standards for us, so science and social studies. Social studies just got finished from the state, and we're working on updating our social studies curriculum. So there's always work to do, which isn't bad to update your thinking. Science, Moriarty is a magnet school also now. STEM, so it's science, technology, engineering, and math is their focus. So we have the ability to do enriching opportunities, I'll say it that way, there, because it's a magnet school.
That was the second suggestion that I read in most of these studies. Besides having real quality teachers, the second biggest suggestion that I've heard everywhere was that parents need choice.
Well,
How much choice do Norwich parents have?
Well, we've grown a lot more in areas of choice. In terms of the magnet schools, that's through lottery. So, it's limited because there are 2 magnet schools. We have
But
2
every child in Norwich has the
to
opportunity.
put their name in that lottery.
How many apply for those schools?
The people who live in that district, see, we're still in those attendance zones is what we call it now. All the lingo's changed. So if you lived in the Waquanic now, if you remember, Taffville, most of those students originally all lived there. They walked to school. We had like 1 bus there.
Right.
Now we probably have 7 buses there because we were able to allow other students to move in. So
But all the musicians don't live there.
no, they can come though if they get in. So we have students from out. We didn't go outside of Norwich to
No,
bring
but
kids in.
No.
Because I really want to focus on our kids, and we don't have the space to bring in new kids. But we do have, and we could talk about that after,
Yeah.
choices outside of Norwich that students have, but
We don't want them in
right,
our communities.
we want them to stay here. But when there's no world language or no instrumental music, you can understand why some of these choices come into play,
Right.
Because your child might want to.
But I was thinking of those parents that identify that their child has musical
And that's
ability.
happened, and they've talked to us, and so they go into the lottery. I don't know, we've had quite a few, I don't know the number of people, but we have to put kind of what I call a cap, I don't like that word, but, a cap on how many in each class for the lottery. Otherwise, we would have way too many.
But how many apply? How many asked to go into the lottery for both
Almost
of us?
everybody who had been in the schools have, but some have opted out. So each of those schools,
Whether they had an interest in music?
right,
is
correct.
the-
It's that
okay.
they want to stay in their school.
And
The ones
that's
who
a big
appl-
difference.
Right, the ones who want to apply from outside of their area, but in Norwich,
Norwich.
are particularly for those reasons. Now, we also have network schools, now that's state funded. Those are called turnaround schools, so those were a couple of our lowest performing schools. The first cohort was 3 years ago, and Stanton said, we want to do this, and we applied, and it was rigorous. Everything is rigorous about it. We have to build a turnaround model. What's going to be different in this school to turn it around? Including, you could move all the teachers out and move everybody new in. So this is our 3rd year. The funding's supposed to end, but the state, we'll see, has said it's been so successful in turning around that we're going to give you
That's very
additional
good.
funding for next year. We'll see, right? But,
Wow.
so that's another choice, kind of. It's the students who live in that neighborhood, and we've added an hour a day to that, so that's a little bit different. Some parents don't want their kids in school till 4 o'clock. it's too long.
Right.
This year, Uncas School, another of our, really in a small neighborhood area,
Right.
said, we want to turn around. We are committed to that, and the administration, the staff, work really hard together, and they've built a model, and they're doing similarly to Stanton, and we're already seeing good results. It's the accountability and everything about it that we have to be doing for what we write that we're going to do. It's like a checklist every day, but not so literally.
Well,
so those are
yes.
those are four
Four.
different things out of our 7 elementaries
Yes.
where there is a little choice in terms of different programming.
So we don't have enough time to go over that, but
this
I
is
think
the fastest,
we
really,
are
honestly.
actually talking about the roadblocks. So since we cannot explain in details or discuss in details what those roadblocks are, let's just jump ahead or jump forward and talk about your favorite topic, which is financials.
Yeah, I hate to end on that.
Financials and infrastructure.
Infrastructure, we started a committee. Well, we know our buildings are old. They were all
Yes.
built, in the 60s or before. The network schools, because they're network schools, have been afforded the opportunity to get some state bonds. So we've been able to improve those facilities. We've applied for technology grants district-wide. So our technology is really not bad for a town, a small town like Norwich with wireless, and most students have access to computers, but all the assessments are computer-based now. So that's another mandate. So you have to be able to provide computers for students. Anyways, that's another topic. So 40% of our staff are grant funded, so that tells you a story. Our general fund, which is based on our taxes, I live here, you live here, and people don't want to pay higher taxes, I get it. However, we have to support education, and I think that's where we've fallen a little bit in Norwich, that education is too expensive, and, well, you get this other money, but our day-to-day operations, right now, our first blush, we need like a 6% increase, and that's not adding a position. That's contractual obligations. Education's expensive, I know that. I know 6% is a lot, so I'm like struggling to figure out how do we bring that down without having, I can't combine, if you look at, and you can look at this at another time, our enrollment, so some of the classes have 24 each, some have 22, 23, 26, 28. How do
The
you?
average is 15.6 children per teacher.
Well, not.
That is supposed to be the average.
Not here, so
Right.
if you look at our enrollment, which I monitor
Right.
regularly, how do I combine classes in order to cut? Because how do you save money is by people, right? You eliminate positions. We can't afford to eliminate positions. We need all of our teachers that have worked so hard to move us forward, and now I'm very nervous about where we have to go with the general fund, because I know there's not a lot, I understand it on a logical level, but on a heart level and on a wanting to do what's right for our future, economic development, we talk about that all the time. How do you not have great schools without, that's our biggest economic development driver in my mind, and I know
But it's not just in your mind. I mean, a number of the studies have already shown that education is the only thing that's going to lift the gap
there you go. Right.
in our economic development.
You're absolutely
Study
right.
after study after this one I think is from Harvard, but every single study that I read showed that, I mean, they gave examples, and again, just looking at how we rank internationally, if we just were able to come up, I forgot how many points it was. Okay, if we would rise by a 6.7% cumulative increase, that would increase $10 trillion in our economics.
So,
But people are not seeing that.
The
One
good-
of the problems, Abby, also, I think that is extremely frustrating. You see where the city is economically. Most of the middle class, we have not gained anything. We have lost.
Right.
Okay. So with the people that have been paying most of the taxes. They're taxed out. You have a state that is actually, in studies, it's shown that Connecticut state taxes are regressive. They're again taxing people who are already overtaxed.
Right.
I think we did this show last week where I had a graph that showed that people that are making $25,000 or less are paying twice as much in their household income
Absolutely.
as people that are making over $133 $1.3 million. They're only paying 5%. I mean, there's that kind of disparity in Connecticut can't continue.
No.
But as long as we allow the state to continue with the regressive tax, Norwich is ending up doing the same thing because it feels it has no choice.
Right. It's not a blame thing. Again, it's where we're at, but I don't know how you break the cycle. For me to have a meeting and they say we're going to give you maybe 1%, that means I have to look for $4 million to cut. How do you find $4 million in what we do? Grants are separate. This is in what we get out of our tax. I don't know. Again, it's not a blame thing. And we don't have our own high school, so some of the challenges that we have students going all around, many of whom go to NFA, great school. 3 generations of my family went there, but with all these options, choice is good. Kids are going all around. We're paying for that. We're paying for students, elementary students, to go to magnet schools in other towns because they want some of the enriching opportunities like music or art that we don't have. So I would say that's where we're caught, is because we only have, who we are and what we have.
But I think that one of the things that I would like to just mention before we have to close tonight, there are a number of ways we as citizens in Norwich can help support our schools. It is not just through making sure that the school budget is reasonable and approved and that it covers the basic needs that we have. Obviously, the Board of Education and you particularly, Abby, have worked at trying to make sure the grants that are available are coming to us so we can at least begin to provide more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic to our children. But as parents, or as a citizen of this city, many of us no longer have children that are in the school system. However, all of us, it is our responsibility for every single one of us to support that school. There are a number of ways we can. Certainly, pick a school, pick any one of our schools, and go there.
Read to kids.
Yes.
We love that.
Yes.
We love when people come in.
But there are ways that, I mean, you've got
We have the
cereal box.
Right, box tops. We have a foundation now that we started by some really hardworking people.
Parents.
It's a small group, but they work hard and we're done, right?
I'm getting all kinds of signals.
I have an idea. Build a football stadium.
Yeah.
In the middle of your schools. But, okay, Abby, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you very much.
We didn't.
This has been quite a rewarding talk,
thank you.
And I really appreciate
We didn't.
I'll come back
the
anytime.
information.
We
Went
didn't
by very
get
fast. I know.
half of these questions answered.
I
but,
know.
I would like you to come back.
Sure.
Maybe after John Bilder's going to come in and talk about the city budget.
That's great.
Maybe right after that
I'd
we
love
could have
to.
you back. And next week we're hoping to have one of the doctors from Yale come in and
Nice.
talk about climate change, another very big issue. So until next week, thank you for watching.
And thank you and good night.
Good night.
Abby,
Thank
you
you.
very much for coming.
Thanks.
Abby, thank you.
Thanks.